Hello, my name is Chloe Folan, and even though today's video is just to answer some deeper queries around my upcoming Rainbow Bridge Phase 1 workshop, the Phase 1 workshop starting in February of this year, this video is also tied into some queries from students that studied the Rainbow Bridge techniques with me last year, and some overlapping queries, meaning some of the deeper questions that I've been asked by people who are working through the Rainbow Bridge Phase 1 techniques from last year's classes, people who've been working through the Rainbow Bridge techniques for some time, coupled with some overlapping queries that I've had about my upcoming February classes. This is all coming together in one video. So first of all, I would just like to address some questions which feed into explaining my upcoming Rainbow Bridge Phase 1 classes in another way, from a different perspective. I've had some students from last year in particular ask me some deeper questions around the clearing work that takes place as you work through Phase 1A of Rainbow Bridge, and also a little bit of Phase 1B. My Rainbow Bridge Phase 1 workshops are now facilitated mainly via Zoom because of international demand through two-hour classes online. And the classes are deliberately broken up. You're given the first half of the Rainbow Bridge Phase 1 teachings, which is Rainbow Bridge Phase 1A, and you're guided through and directed with how to work through what you're taught in the first half of the class to still work with the auric protection and strengthening exercises, as well as to continue to work with Rainbow Bridge Phase 1A, which is what we go into in depth in the first Rainbow Bridge online class. Phase 1A teaches you how to properly and healthily connect with your soul star chakra, which is a chakra that's located roughly about 6 inches above your own head. And your soul star is actually the lowest chakra of your higher self. It's a portion of your soul put down into matter, or into the closest rapport with your matter. Now, yes, of course, technically speaking, energy flows through us in many ways, but I'm talking about the deeper soul ecology of how your higher self connects to and through you, through your physical body. And I've mentioned this a few times in other Rainbow Bridge videos that you might like to watch. At the time you are physically born, an orb of light will hover over the head of the baby being born. And it can be a natural birth or medically assisted birth. The minute the baby comes out, and however, an orb of light floats over the baby's head. And the minute the baby takes the first breath, that soul to head thread starts to anchor. And that is the first linkage, the first deeper linkage between matter and spirit at the time of birth. So that starts to form the soul to head thread, which is the first portion of the consciousness thread of the Antakarana. So as part of Rainbow Bridge Phase 1 classes, you were taught a very ancient but highly effective pure mantra for identifying as a soul, a conscious soul in incarnation. And it's also an ancient mantra that also activates the soul star. And the soul mantra, the more the soul mantra is worked with and absorbed, the soul mantra will also start to expand the soul star and develop the soul star chakra into an actual star shape above the head. And I'm going to create a different video about why the soul star chakra is called a soul star, because it doesn't start to take that shape and formation until a proper amount of clearing work is done internally and externally. How the soul star develops into a 5-rayed soul star cannot be manipulated, nor can someone just imagine or create that when it's not there. To anyone with intact inner vision, you have the ability to see through those types of personal thought forms versus the development that is actually there within the body and the auric field. So the soul mantra prayer: I am the soul, I am the light divine, I am love, I am will, I am fixed design, is a powerful mantra that identifies you as a soul in incarnation, and also gently activates and expands soul light within your soul star chakra. And over time, along with the combination of the deeper karmic clearing techniques of Rainbow Bridge Phase 1, will start to develop the soul star chakra itself as you move through a deeper spiritual evolutionary process that the Rainbow Bridge Phase 1 techniques induce. And when it comes to Phase 1A, once you've been guided through the deeper workings of the soul mantra prayer and connecting with the soul mantra prayer, suggestions and guidance over how to deepen that experience of working with the soul mantra prayer, you're then taught how to properly work with Phase 1A of the Rainbow Bridge techniques, which involves working and co-creating with the soul star chakra for clearing deeper blockages in the central vertical channel. I believe it was last year I created a video called Rainbow Bridge Phase 1, the central vertical channel, where what I'm now about to speak about, I talk about in length in that video, so you might want to reference that video. The blockages you're clearing out of the central vertical channel are blockages that are there because of internal karmic imbalance that you inherit through your family lines, meaning it's a lot deeper than just ancestry. It's unhealed genetic memory that you inherit just by virtue of the race or races you are genetically connected to through birth, physical birth. The secondary blockages that you work through with Phase 1A in the central vertical channel are there from stress points in life that you've experienced. So, for example, if at the time you were born, there were already heavy internal patterns in the upper abdomen area, as you then grow and develop, if you go through a stressful life event that puts your self-confidence under pressure, that can add another layer of mental calcification in that upper abdomen area of the channel. And how that happens is you're going about your life, and then maybe there's a bit of a tense disagreement with somebody, and you're having trouble maybe processing that because of the tapering in the upper abdomen area of the channel. And then if it's very difficult to then, think of what you feel you need to say on the spot to kind of work through that kind of difficulty, if it stresses you out hugely and you don't feel or think you handled the situation the best, then another layer of mental calcification can be added to that area of the channel. So that's just one example of the secondary blockages that you're clearing out of the channel. That's part of phase 1A. So what I have been asked by a few students from last year, as well as overlapping with queries for this year's classes, is some deeper queries around exactly what's experienced, especially with phase 1A, working with the soul star chakra to clear those initial blockages in safe stages, the triangulation process for clearing the central channel in cooperation with the soul star chakra, which is one of the higher self chakras. What tends to happen, and I've documented and catalogued this with numerous case studies, is as you work with the soul star chakra to clear those blockages, it's more the secondary blockages from your current lifetime that are noticed. So in other words, if you're working with the soul star chakra and you've reached the point, the upper abdomen point, which is point 4, and my goodness, please work properly with phase 1A in the given stages properly. But when you work down to the upper abdomen area, point 4, triangle 4, you'll notice that as you're working with that process, that it could bring up memories from times where you did struggle to find the right words, or bring up memories from times where your confidence was challenged. And I always like to highlight for people, as you're working on a particular point, the memories that come back to mind, are you perceiving what you're clearing? I sometimes find that people can have a certain expectation of what inner vision should be, meaning sometimes people expect it to be maybe like watching a movie inside your head, and sometimes it can be for some people. But for others, another way of describing developing inner vision capacity is just observing and being aware of what you're experiencing when you're working through a karmic clearing technique of the caliber of the Rainbow Bridge techniques. So for instance, coming back to that example, working with your soul star chakra, and you've properly worked down to the upper abdomen point, point 4, with the soul star chakra for clearing that area of the channel. And as you're working through that process, all of a sudden, you remember a time where your confidence was challenged, or a time where your confidence wasn't as greatest. Those are the old emotional and mental calcifications being released from that area of the channel. So that is what you are clearing. The memories that come back to mind, the feelings as you're working through such a poignant clearing process. That's your inner vision showing you. That's you witnessing what's releasing out of your system on a deeper level. And that's also why you work with the spiritual vortex properly, for clearing out any secondary images that are released and clearing out toxins that are released. And you work with the vortex properly to make sure no debris remains in the auric field after doing deep, poignant clearing of that nature. So phase 1A is very personally revealing for where there might be bits and pieces internally that do need a bit more refinement and healing. And this is why I love it. I love it when I have people come to me who are interested in the techniques, who are doing other techniques, who will continue to work with other techniques, because I love being able to offer people with proper eclectic pathways a technique that I know will not be a waste of your time, no matter what technique you have or have not done, because of what you will witness, what you will find, what will cleanse out your system. So coming to phase 1A, if you're working on an area that maybe is already in good condition within the channel, then that area you might not notice that much. You'll still certainly feel lovely soul warmth of the soul star moving through that area. You'll also notice proper energy being able to flow through the channel more freely. But you'll know the areas yourself that still had deeper bits and pieces that were still a little bit blocked in the channel by what you witness and observe as you work through the phase 1A process. It's very revealing. And the Rainbow Bridge phase 1 techniques provide really deep, poignant core healing. It's another way that I describe Rainbow Bridge phase 1. Deep core healing. And one of the reasons why that is so important, even if you've already had deep exposure in other techniques, is because if the central channel has blocks and tapering, it can then impede effectiveness of other techniques. Meaning this is why your core foundations are so important. I've said this to a few people when I very first started assisting people with the phase 1 Rainbow Bridge techniques. I found myself always trying to express and explain properly why phase 1 has so much emphasis on the central vertical channel. The part of your central channel from the soul star chakra down through the body to the earth star, that's your spiritual inner ear organ. That is the tube of light that your major and minor chakras communicate through. It's your core filter for perceiving and registering what's happening around you and to you, and also for how you view your own internal world. So if deeper healing is needed for the central channel, you can pick all you want at a core wound or external karmic imbalance or even internal. Trying to do that without the channel in proper, clear, wide condition makes techniques for clearing the auric field, it reduces effectiveness, is what I'm trying to say. I'll never forget, I had the privilege, Dr. Ronald Tiggle hosted a Rainbow Bridge phase 1 and phase 2 workshop in August 2012. And I had the privilege of being able to attend that workshop in Ireland. He came over and facilitated the workshop in Ireland. And I could talk all day. Where I'd already started the Rainbow Bridge techniques. I was already starting into Rainbow Bridge phase 2 when Dr. Ronald Tiggle came over to host the Rainbow Bridge phase 1 and phase 2 workshops. So I went to both because I wanted to meet somebody who had more experience with the Rainbow Bridge techniques than me, and also had worked directly with Norman Stevens, meaning he was a part of one of Norman's core groups. So I could talk all day about that experience in terms of nuggets of wisdom that were shared, information, insights. It was at that workshop that I noticed some people had 5-pointed stars above their heads. And I was fascinated. And that's what actually prompted me into continuing with my Rainbow Bridge phase 2 process. Because a small handful of people at that workshop had a 5-pointed star above their head. I'd never seen anything like that in my life, meaning I was seeing this clairvoyantly within their development process. Keep in mind, I had already started to help with the Rainbow Bridge techniques, but it wasn't until I met others who were further along, who'd been doing the Rainbow Bridge techniques for longer, that it was in them I could see these 5-pointed stars above their heads. And I was kind of sitting there going, oh my goodness, wow, why is that there? What's that? And I got my answer. It's in the free Antakarana PDF that I have on my website for free, the causation of the Rainbow Bridge techniques. It's explained in full detail. But as well as that being one of the promptings that encouraged me to continue with my own Rainbow Bridge clearing work, Dr. Ronald Tiggle said something twice at that workshop. And some people might have not registered it the right way, or maybe not heard him. I heard him say it twice. The Rainbow Bridge techniques are phenomenal for cleaning up the vehicles so you can enjoy the full fruits of other techniques. Meaning, because the Rainbow Bridge techniques, if you follow phase 1 and phase 2 properly, those techniques will completely clear all karmic imbalance externally and internally. And as well as what that causes development-wise, evolutionary-wise, I now mean, because of the clear state of your vehicles, meaning your auric field, internally and externally, it enables you to then connect with other techniques and be able to connect more deeply with other techniques. And that's just fact. So while some people might have taken umbrage with that, I'll say it again. It is esoteric fact. So this brings me back to proper esoteric teachings. It's proper esoteric fact that if you are able to reach a point where you've cleared all karmic imbalance internally and externally, because of the evolutionary point that causes within your development, as well as the body's being clear and free of distortions and things of that nature, you are then able to connect with other techniques and assess if another technique is worth your while doing properly, or you're able to get more out of a technique that you work with, deeper insights, more insight, able to work more deeply with another technique because of the clear state of your bodies. And the Rainbow Bridge techniques are available free. So I just like to recap on some aspects of what I've shared. So as I was saying, this video is in relation to some deeper questions that I've received around experiences with working through phase 1A, questions around what to expect and techniques that will be worked with for my upcoming phase 1 classes, and just some other insights that I felt might be useful to share. So Rainbow Bridge phase 1 properly heals, clears, and widens your central vertical channel very methodically in a safe healthy and digestible manner. It's done in stages on a very deep level. Because of how you work with the soul star chakra through the central vertical channel, when you come to widening the channel, which is also a part of phase 1, that's called phase 1B, widening the channel, that allows the chakras to sit into place properly. Rainbow Bridge phase 1 is phenomenal for inner core healing. If there is any calcification, any blockage of any kind remaining in your central vertical channel, or just if your central vertical channel needs some more widening, this technique will do that on such a deep, healthy, safe level. And I'll gently say it again. If within the central vertical channel there's any tapering, or if there's an area where it's too thin, and you're trying to work with clearing external karmic imbalance, a core wound, internal work, having a channel where there's still blockages and tapering makes that ineffective, highly ineffective. It won't do much. It might provide a little bit of a high, you might like it, it might feel nice, but it certainly won't create a proper change within the vehicles. And it's esoteric law that if you want to change the karmic narrative, you must create a change, a proper change within the vehicles. Meaning this is also where people exhaust themselves. People horizontally, sideways, will, force a change in where they live, or force a change in who they connect with, or force a change in the work environment, but without addressing the underlying wound that could be making that uncomfortable. So the wound comes with you. Unless something happens directly or indirectly or soul-induced by accident, if you don't properly clear the wounding, the blockage that's, causing deeper issues of that kind that would make you push and force yourself uphill to externally manipulate and force a big change in the environment, unless you deal with that underlying wound, it comes with you and it gets triggered and it manifests again in different ways or things of that nature. So what I always like to say to people, and another way I like to describe Rainbow Bridge phase 1, is when it comes to people looking for proper personal and spiritual development techniques, don't set yourself up to fail. If the central channel isn't of a proper condition, it will only give you minimal results trying to clear anything else. The central channel must be in proper clear wide condition first before undertaking any type of deeper work outside of the channel. The remaining internal patterns, remaining external distortions in the auric field. And sometimes when I'm observing people getting stressed, they get into a very stressful situation because a pattern's being activated. There's a lot of stress trying to process that stressful occurrence because the channel's a bit thin in a certain area. It's making it difficult to process and really kind of makes full sense of what's going on. A pattern's been activated that's causing a lot of emotional and mental distress. And then someone's sitting there going, what's wrong with me? There's nothing wrong with you. There is imbalance within an internal and external pattern. There's something happening within the auric field. And I can see it in people. One of the blessings of having very intact inner vision. I see this happen to people over and over and over again. where they unkindly try to push themselves and bully themselves and try to push themselves uphill and don't give themselves a chance. If you are interested in personal and spiritual development, proper personal and spiritual development, before trying to manifest something, before trying to create a change, before doing something of that nature, take a gigantic step back, a deep breath, take pressure off yourself, and connect with a technique like the Rainbow Bridge techniques that will properly clear and widen the central vertical channel, induce very deep core healing. Give yourself that break, that opportunity, and then gently reconnect and try. In terms of the Rainbow Bridge techniques phase 1, it does take around 4 to 5 months to complete all of phase 1A and phase 1B. And even though everyone's lives are different, if you are able to take the pressure cooker off yourself and just let life happen and just connect with the Rainbow Bridge techniques and just let life unfold and let go and allow some time for deeper healing work before you try and do more deliberately, what I always find is beautiful things and very healthy healing things start to happen anyway, without forcing it as you work with the Rainbow Bridge phase 1 techniques. But my goodness, if you're noticing that pattern of maybe you've already done some type of other energetic work, or maybe you know you're intelligent, you know you're smart, you know you're knowledgeable, and you're good at putting a plan together and following through with a proper plan, but there's just this constant hiccup or issue happening, and you know there's something not quite adding up, even though the Rainbow Bridge techniques manifest differently for different people, depending on what karma is being worked through. The Rainbow Bridge phase 1 techniques will always produce positive results if the techniques are worked with properly and coherently and methodically. So it might be an idea for fresh starts for the new year to consider looking into the Rainbow Bridge phase 1 techniques, and they are available for free. I'll put that down the bottom of the link to this video, the soul1.org website, where you can look at the Rainbow Bridge techniques for free. But if you would like a tutoring class, a deeper tutoring class on the techniques, I'd love to hear from you. And I'll put a link down the bottom of the video as well to how you can contact me through my website, www.chloefolan.com, and a link to the Rainbow Bridge phase 1 workshops that I offer that give the details over what's taught, and time and dates, and things of that nature. One other point I would like to make, but I'll put this in a separate video. I sometimes also get asked about point of development for evolution, meaning people that are very aware of ascension, how ascension works. Rainbow Bridge phase 1 guarantees that if you follow the phase 1 techniques properly, you will get fully built to your soul star. And I've witnessed in people that continue with the techniques even after the initial 4 to 5 months, that can sometimes even induce starting to build to your triad. And this year, and it's only happened this year, I had a class where I had Rainbow Bridge people for phase 1 who were already starting to build to their triad. So if you are already starting to build to your triad, when you start the Rainbow Bridge phase 1 techniques, you will get fully built to your triad, and then maybe a little to your monad, but just breaking down the basic mechanics. Rainbow Bridge Phase 1 aims to get you fully built to your Soul Star chakra, and maybe a little bit to your triad as well. Rainbow Bridge Phase 2 gets you fully built to your triad and monad. In other words, externally clear and building to your monadic chakra. So that's the fourth stage of building the Rainbow Bridge. At that point then in your development, you can inquire over advanced Rainbow Bridge, the monadic thread techniques that have been catalogued to induce building to your Ray Path chakra, grounding your Ray Path chakra, causing the major chakras, the rest of them, to turn secondary, as well as blending the aura layers, continuing to open the rings in the heart chakra. So in other words, Rainbow Bridge Phase 1, built to Soul Star, maybe starting to build to Triad if you're not there already. Rainbow Bridge Phase 2, building to Triad, building to your monad, and then monadic thread for inducing stage 5, stage 6, stage 7 of building the Rainbow Bridge if you work with the techniques consistently and long enough, and maybe a little bit of stage 8 with commitment, or Rainbow Bridge Phase 1 and continued Phase 2 work will minimum bring you to stage 6 of building the Rainbow Bridge, grounding your Ray Path chakra, meaning in people who do Rainbow Bridge Phase 1 and then Rainbow Bridge Phase 2 and don't do monadic thread. I've witnessed in those people still getting externally and internally clear and minimum grounding their Ray Path chakra, meaning minimum getting to stage 6 of building the Rainbow Bridge. There are people that have gone further with just Phase 2, but usually when people are working with me, I'll be bringing monadic thread up with them. So in other words, the bulk of people that work with me do end up at some point doing monadic thread, meaning people don't just do Phase 2 and only just stick with Phase 2 when they work with me. So I'll create a whole nother video on the Rainbow Bridge building stages that the Rainbow Bridge techniques induce, meaning the stages of evolution that the Rainbow Bridge techniques cause, but that information is available on my website. I've got an Antkrana playlist as well on my YouTube channel. It's in the Antkrana document, all of that information as well. So on that note, I believe I've fully addressed everything I wanted to address in this video, discussing a little bit about causation of Rainbow Bridge Phase 1, some deeper questions around Phase 1, some deeper questions around Rainbow Bridge in general, and the teachings of Rainbow Bridge Phase 1, Phase 2, and monadic thread. So just to bring things back to original intent, please feel free to have a look at the Rainbow Bridge techniques on the soul1.org website. But if you're very interested in receiving a guided tutoring class in the Rainbow Bridge Phase 1 techniques, I would love to hear from you. Please feel free to contact me through my website, www.chloefolden.com. As always, I hope the information shared has been insightful and has been helpful and has provided really good food for thought. On that note, 7 ray blessings to all.